In the summer of 1983, India was swept up in the euphoria of lifting the Cricket World Cup. But nearly 1,000 miles away from that global stage, the political machinery in Patna, Bihar, was preoccupied with a much darker, much quieter operation. This is the Bihar Legislative Assembly building. It is the absolute center of state power, where laws are written and political fates are decided. It was also the daily workplace of a young woman who would nearly bring this entire building to its knees. Her name was Shwet Nisha Trivedi, though everyone in the halls of power knew her simply as Bobby. Officially, her rank was modest. She was just a telephone operator and typist in the secretariat. But socially, she held a unique paradox of power. As the adopted daughter of Rajeshwari Saroj Das, a senior Congress leader and chairperson of the state's Legislative Council, Bobby had direct, informal access to Bihar's most elite politicians. On May 8, 1983, that proximity to power proved fatal. Bobby died suddenly in her mother's official residence. Before the sun was fully up and within 4 hours of her last breath, her body was rushed to a cemetery and buried in secrecy. There was no police report, no standard medical protocol, and no legal inquiry. The decision to bury a body in 4 hours, bypassing every legal and medical safeguard, effectively transformed a sudden death into a state secret. The immediate aftermath of Bobby's death was marked by a glaring procedural void. No first information report was filed by the family or the state. Yet, despite the complete lack of a police investigation, 2 separate official autopsy reports miraculously materialized. Looking at these documents side by side reveals an impossible medical contradiction. One doctor certified the cause as severe internal bleeding. The second doctor claimed a sudden heart attack. These contradictions provided a perfect bureaucratic defense, ensuring any criminal probe would be met with manufactured medical confusion. That plan might have worked, if not for the newly appointed senior superintendent of Patna Police, Kishore Kanal. Kanal had built a reputation across the state as an uncompromising, fiercely independent officer, a sharp contrast to the highly compliant political ecosystem he was suddenly operating within. A state-sponsored cover-up requires total, unquestioning compliance from every rung of the institutional ladder. SSP Kanal's arrival introduced the single variable a conspiracy of this scale cannot survive: an investigator who ignores the political pressure and simply follows the evidence. Kanal's first major tactical move was also his boldest. Ignoring the intense pressure radiating from the state capital, he secured a legal order to literally unearth the truth. He sent a team to the cemetery, exhumed Bobby's decomposing corpse, and handed it over for an independent, rigorous forensic analysis. The new forensic team extracted the viscera and ran the tests. The results completely shattered the earlier claims of heart attacks and internal bleeding. Bobby had been killed by a lethal dose of a poison called malathion. Malathion is a highly toxic agricultural insecticide. You don't find it in standard household medicine cabinets, and you don't accidentally overdose on it to cure a stomachache. Its presence in Bobby's system proved beyond a doubt that this was a deliberate, calculated murder. Armed with proof of a homicide, police raided the outhouse near the victim's residence. The young men living there finally broke their silence. They gave sworn statements placing the son of a prominent Congress politician at the house on the exact night Bobby's condition suddenly deteriorated. For a brief window, forensic science stripped away the political immunity of Bihar's elite. What started as a quiet cover-up had transformed into a ticking time bomb, and the wires pointed directly toward the government's inner circle. The realization that police were about to start arresting political royalty sparked sheer panic. Nearly 4 dozen members of the Legislative Assembly and state ministers stormed the office of Chief Minister Dr. Juggernaut Mishra. Their demand was simple: shut down the local police investigation immediately, or face a total political revolt. To survive the crisis, the Chief Minister executed a highly effective jurisdictional maneuver. He officially transferred the entire Bobby case to the Central Bureau of Investigation. In one stroke, he legally stripped SSP Kunal and the Patna police of their authority to investigate the murder. The public generally expects a federal agency to bring deeper scrutiny to a case. But the CBI's methodology here was uniquely passive. The federal investigators never actually traveled to Patna. They never examined the outhouse where the poisoning occurred,
and they never interviewed the prime witnesses who had spoken to the local police. Instead, operating entirely from their offices in Delhi, the CBI drafted a fabricated conclusion. They declared that Bobby's death was a suicide, driven by a broken heart over a failed romance. To support this, they relied heavily on a conveniently discovered, unverified suicide note addressed to a supposed lover, a note that had never appeared during the local police raids. To explain away the hard toxicology data, the CBI offered an absurd scientific rationale. This flowchart illustrates their logic. They claimed Bobby merely swallowed an overdose of sensible tablets, which is a mild over-the-counter laxative. As for the lethal malathion discovered in her system, the federal agency officially ruled that it must have contaminated her viscera samples due to a freak laboratory mix-up at the forensic lab. The CBI's report demonstrated that when a state agency holds the final legal authority, it no longer needs its findings to be scientifically plausible. It only needs to declare them as the official record. The final procedural failure occurred in the courtroom. Despite the glaring scientific impossibilities of the CBI's narrative, and despite loud protests from the original local forensic experts, the judicial system officially accepted the federal agency's closure report without question. The immediate fallout was permanent. The political suspects were legally and completely cleared of all wrongdoing. The physical evidence files were locked away in the archives, and a calculated homicide was forever documented in official records as a tragic, lonely suicide.
Records from the period indicate that briefings on the case reached as far as Prime Minister Indira Gandhi's office, showing that the fallout of this single murder threatened the highest levels of national leadership. Ultimately, two completely different narratives emerged from the death of Shwet Nisha Trivedi. SSP Kunal's narrative, backed by physical evidence and eyewitness testimony, was systematically buried. The government's narrative, built on missing files and fabricated science, became the law. In the Bobby scandal, the institutions tasked with finding the truth functioned instead to protect the government's survival. When the investigation threatened the ruling party, the legal process itself became the mechanism used to end it.